All right, it is 6:11. I'm currently at the intersection of Balin and Wright. I had started recording this about a minute ago, and then the number 2 bus came down Balin Street, and at the same time that this was occurring, I saw a few of these little chime things rang on my phone, and I learned that those do register in the recording, and I did not want them in the recording. And because I did not want them in the recording, I decided to re-record. I'm going to talk now about a proposal I had back in the 2014 time frame when I owned my home on 2156 Venetia Road, which I purchased for $119,000. I believe it was $119,900, or it might have been something like $119,200. I know it was $119 something back in the start of 2013. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the River Park area of Mobile, you go down Navco Road, and then you cross a set of railroad tracks. Now, to the left, you cross into Dog River Drive, which is known as, I think it's something like Dog River Manor or something, is the technical subdivision name, which is one of the most notorious flood zones in Mobile, but which has some of the most affordable waterfront property probably in a metropolitan area in the country. It's one of the only places that you're going to be able to get a house that's habitable with a fully functional boat dock that you can store a deep water boat at for under $100,000. But there's a reason why it's under $100,000. It's because it's a notorious floodplain that will flood in tropical storms, so you're paying very high flood insurance premiums. And it's because on the inland lots in the neighborhood, you are literally finding excellent houses sold for under $30,000. It has a reputation now as one of the most notorious slums in Mobile, even though you have a police officer living in it, in one of the inland lots. And I know what those inland lots cost, so they're not paying a high mortgage. But that has not deterred drug activity and crime activity from the inland areas of the neighborhood. People who live on the water deal with it, and I've actually not heard any examples of the people who live on the water having their homes broken into, so I guess it works for them. But in my case, the reason why I proposed the dock there is because I had an inland lot on Venetia Road, and I had the cheapest buy-in on Venetia Road probably in the decade. But remember that most of the houses on the Dog River side, because you have Venetia Road, and then you have the side that is even numbered, and that for most of the road is not on Dog River, and then you have the odd number side of the road where most of the houses have several acres of land, and these are generally deep, narrow lots that go out to Dog River, but most of them, if you look at the acreage totals, they're pretty high. This was always a neighborhood of waterfront estates back really to the 1930s and even some in the 1920s. When you look at the profile of the neighborhood, it is clear that, there was an inland lot, there was a house that was about 3,000 square feet on 2 acres, a couple of houses down the street from me, and they wanted something like $300,000 for it. But if that house had been on the river, it would have been $1 million property, probably, or close to it. And then Venetia Road, once you get past whatever that little road is that Burgett Road turns into, and then it descends a steep hill once you get right past Point Legier Road, and then you have basically sea-level homes that have really crowded together on Dog River. And this is where I think someone opposed my dock proposal. And then you have some riverfront homes. But it's basically, you've got a lot of waterfront estates out there. But then you have the inland lots on the roads like Burgett and North that command less of a price. But right now, this neighborhood south of the track has escaped a lot of the urban decay that has occurred north of the tracks on Navco and also in Dog River Manor. And part of it is that there is a camera on Venetia Road, not on Venetia Road, on Navco Road. You cross the tracks, you turn right, you go past this little old general store type place and this little church. It's basically like a rural neighborhood inside the city of Mobile, but this is what most neighborhoods on Dolphin Island Parkway on the interior also look like. Most of them have pretty wide lots too. But you go into the neighborhood, and on Venetia Road, you have, but basically down there, you have all these inland lots. And the inspiration for what I wanted to do came from a development that I will discuss next, and that is Heron Landing, which they basically put a strip of land. They took a strip of land that had frontage on Dolphin Island Parkway that went back to Dog River. They put in a couple of roads like egret crossing. They put in those specialty street signs that particularly in the post-1956 areas of the city have become ubiquitous in an attempt to make a neighborhood look quote-unquote upscale. And the point was they were trying to get people, the idea was that they had a certain number of waterfront lots that were actually pretty high priced, probably too high priced, in my opinion, or else they would have sold, because you can get a lot of better lots for a lot cheaper in that region. You can get completed houses with more land with water access for a lot cheaper. And then they built these inland lots. And each of the inland lots, they generally wanted about $40,000 for. And when you got an inland lot, you got a boat slip at the community boat dock that belongs to Heron Landing. And a few people have bought those lots. There's a guy that has stored his boat there for a long time. But there are restrictive covenants on the neighborhood. One of the restrictive covenants is that you have to build a house that is at least 2,000 square feet or larger. There are other covenants, but this is the reason why the neighborhood is not developed. They put all these covenants on, and then you put the price scales on, and if it were, say, in Cypress Shores, it would have developed. But it's off Dolphin Island Parkway. And actually, close to a part of Dolphin Island Parkway that has seen what we would call the most urban decay in terms of what urban planners would say, and this is why it is not selling anything. And it's not going to sell anything as it is. You either have to wait for the market and inflation to adjust while you're keeping those lot prices as they are, or you have to do something different with that site. But that's where I got the inspiration, and I'm going to talk about Heron Landing in its own piece. From my point of view, for what I want to do this morning, I'm going to talk about the proposed dock at Venetia Road, because there was, if you went down past Point Leger, there were several acres of land that have been declared wetlands by the federal government for what I was told by Denton Boykin. But Denton Boykin was trying to sell the several acres for $70,000. I had interest in that property, and I inquired about it. I mainly wanted to construct a community boat dock because as wetlands, you would have to have other land that you can have declared wetlands in order to take lands that are declared wetland out of wetland, because to be declared wetland by the federal government means you can't develop on it. It means you can't do a lot of things. But my thinking was, with that lot, you could probably get away with building some kind of marina or dock and still get away with keeping it as wetlands. You could build a pier and a dock, and the idea was basically, it would be we would basically try and get we would find some way to finance it. I'd only begun to discuss the idea. But the idea was a community dock, because I thought that you could get away with building a community dock there while the land remained wetlands per the federal government, and that might have been the only thing you could have built there. But it would have basically been based on the Heron Landing type of schema, where every homeowner on an inland lot would have been assigned a lot that they owned, and having so been assigned the lot that they owned, Heron Landing property owners would have been able to basically, it would have been the same thing, not Heron Landing, River Park, and I'm just using River Park as a general designation for everything on that south of the tracks neighborhood in Navco. But the idea was you would have this dock. And at this dock, every inland lot would have gotten a slip, for example, I would have gotten a slip at 2156. All the inland lots on Venetia Road would have gotten a slip. The one thing that would have done is that just the possession of that boat slip deeded to my property and then the access of a private community dock, it would have it would have raised the immediate sale price of my house that I was automatically going to get 75% to 100%, and it would not have cost that much in overall community investment. But for some of the bigger houses on Venetia, you know, that house that was for sale for $300,000 with, because remember that house, and you would know, if you've been on Venetia Road, you would know the one I'm talking about, because a lot of Venetia Road in that area is smaller 60s era ranch houses in there, and there was actually apparently a tornado in Hurricane Frederick is supposed to have come on Venetia Road. I know in my house, the original house plans from the mid-1960s, I found a room in the house. But Venetia Road, the thing is that house that, and those who own Venetia Road know what I'm talking about. That property, $300,000 without a dock. If you had added the dock and the membership of the private boat slip, that easily becomes close to a $500,000 property. The other thing this would have done is that by raising the values of the inland properties, and this is why I think that people who on the water might have talked about the idea and might have opposed it, had no idea what the hell they were talking about when it comes to real estate development, is that if you've suddenly raised all the inner prices of the real estate, that means that you're getting a higher end clientele buying on the inland lots. What that would have also meant is that it would have become an even more exclusive neighborhood. And so, for example, that property that sort of down Venetia Road was for sale for $1.3 million, which was a large waterfront estate with a large waterfront mansion, one of those little side driveways that's off of Venetia Road, west of where Navco comes in, that suddenly becomes a $2 million property. But of course, people in Mobile think small. They don't think like developers. They think like people who just want to preserve what little they have. And that's why the city never gets anywhere, and as always will be almost the city of perpetual potential unless you get the right person there. And they have not had the right person there since Dow, really. But as I said, the lot would have been, and that's more in terms of, and that's actually, that is a criticism of the two previous, the current and the previous administration, and that they just did not seek the kind of visionary projects that Mike Dow did. I could comment on where I think each administration succeeded and failed. That's not the purpose of this. But in the case of Mobile, what we're looking at is these lots on Venetia Road. The dock, the community dock. There are not that many inland lots in River Park. You could have assigned every house a boat slip. And I'll go to my death thinking that this was a good idea. And this might be an idea that I still try to implement at some point in my life, because it really still wouldn't cost that much money, and I don't think that swampland on Venetia is going to come to any other use, because if someone was going to turn it to a waterfront estate, you know, that could make a waterfront estate, and if they could drain the land, you know, that would be $1 million property. But the problem is, you've got to have another close to 3 acres somewhere else that you can have declared as wetlands in order to even begin to build a house on that property. I thought we could skate by with building a dock and pier on the wetlands based on the fact that there are a number of properties that are considered wetlands by the federal government that have docks and piers and that are public parks and things like that, and that's why I thought you could skate by. You will never convince me that it was a bad idea, but I do think that this idea had something to do with the chain of events that led to a lot of what I suffered in the mid-2010s in Mobile. I think if you look at why there was pressure to force me to get rid of my house in 2016, I think it all traces back to the dock proposal. So I wanted to state my case on what I wanted to do with the dock proposal, because I think